Mimic, it's a mimic. It's your favorite blood device. That's me, Mimic. Silly Mimic. And he always plays nice. I steal arms. He mimics you, he mimics me, he mimics the whole family, Mimic. Hello guys, and welcome back to the second part of Continuity from the Pizzaplex. My name is ClavisKey, and I'm so glad to have you guys back for another video. Sorry it took so long to make the second part. I delayed writing the script because I was nervous Rune would maybe confirm or debunk the existence of the Mimic. And, well, it looks like it's a good thing I waited. Because I think after Rune, more people are curious about the Mimic. Like I said at the end of the last video, we will fully go into the Mimic. The Mimic is a villain that has appeared in multiple tales from the Pizzaplex stories and is the main antagonist of these books. And like I said in the last video, he probably is also someone we're already familiar with. To make things as understandable as possible, I'll firstly explain all the factual information about the Mimic, and then we'll get into theorizing territory. So let's not waste any time. Mimic, it's a mimic, and now it's a storytelling AI. Why? Mimic, silly Mimic, gave war flashbacks to an old guy. I'm sorry, he mimics you, he mimics me, he mimics inside of a dream, Mimic. The Mimic is one of the most interesting and mysterious characters in recent FNAF. The Mimic already made his first appearance in the first tales from the Pizzaplex epilogue. But since these stories are like the games, we got a lot of fractured pieces of the story presented to us. To simplify the storyline, I made the decision to put everything we know so far about the Mimic in chronological order. The first event in the timeline is the story The Mimic, the story about the Mimic's creation. The story follows the character Edwin, a Fazbear Entertainment engineer and single father of a little boy named David. Together they live in an abandoned lace factory. Edwin moved there after his wife Fiona died in childbirth. Edwin used to have his own company where he made his own inventions, like his first creation, a robotic vacuum. But after his company started to go downhill, it was bought by Fazbear Entertainment. Now instead of working on fun projects of his own, Edwin is forced to turn the empty mascot suits Fazbear Entertainment sends him into fully working animatronics for their locations. But working is hard when you're a single father with a little kid who is in need of constant attention and supervision. So Edwin came up with a brilliant idea to make a robot to take care and distract his son while he works on his commissions. Edwin first creates a program called Mimic 1 and puts it into the endoskeleton made with spare parts. The legless endoskeleton is made to mimic and copy behavior from other people. So when it sees David for the first time, it immediately starts copying his movement. David quickly falls in love with his new playmate. They start creating their own sign language to communicate with each other, since the Mimic isn't able to talk. One of the movements the Mimic starts copying is the way David holds his white tiger plushie, by curling his arm into a similar way. But he also copies other things he learns from playing with David, like learning how to draw and hiding in costume suits. The Mimic even starts to not just copy movement, but he also starts to learn how to respond to certain actions instead of just copying what he sees. Edwin got up and walked over to his son. "What are you doing?" he asked. David looked up and grinned. Then he looked back at Mimic. "Is it ready?" he asked Mimic. Mimic nodded. Edwin's brows rose. This wasn't mimicking. It was responding. When had that happened? Meanwhile, Edwin has the time of his life, finally being able to focus on his work while his son is occupied. But one day, this all goes wrong. While the Mimic and David are playing catch, the ball accidentally rolls outside. David, running after the ball, goes out on the streets and gets hit by a car. Edwin is devastated by the death of his son and blames himself for it. As a way to let out his anger, he starts beating up the Mimic endoskeleton, lashing out because the animatronic reminds him of his son, making the Mimic feel the pain he's feeling, punishing him like he thinks he should be punished himself. By doing this, he infects the Mimic with all his sadness and all his grief, his agony. For 2 weeks, Edwin had been lost in the void of despair, and now his despair had turned to rage. He had to get it out somehow, or it would consume him, because Edwin knew, even as he continued to scream and foam at the mouth, that the real object of his anger was himself. And that infuriated him even more. He wanted to destroy himself, but he couldn't. So he supplemented his rat onto the Mimic with an intensity he hadn't known he had in him. He lost control of his humanity. He was devolving into a primitive version of himself, into something ferocious and savage. He could almost feel his murderous thoughts pouring through his muscles and transfusing through the metal into the Mimic's systems. After this, we get a time skip. Some Fazbear employees go to Edwin's abandoned factory to collect something. They aren't exactly told what it is. They just know it's something that belongs to Fazbear Entertainment. Once they are there, the factory doors close behind them, trapping them inside. While trying to find a way out, one of the employees named Dominic finds a recording left by the previous team that were sent to the factory. Through the recordings, he finds out that the last development team found the Mimic and fixed him up, giving him a pair of legs. And quickly he also finds out what happened afterwards, finding the bodies of the previous team, killed in peculiar ways. A corpse stuffed in a fridge, another one hung on a coat hanger like a piece of clothing. Not long after, the Mimic also starts attacking the second team, constantly hiding in different costume suits, like it learned to do from David. A jester suit, a mushroom, even a lion. The story ends with the death of all 3 employees. After this, we learn from the epilogues that Fazbear Entertainment did indeed somehow get their hands on the Mimic endoskeleton. With this program in their possession, the first Fazbear Entertainment creative team got the idea to make a second version of the Mimic, called Mimic 2. This was a mass-produced version of the Mimic endoskeleton, containing the AI of Mimic 1. The endoskeletons were made as a shortcut to programming show routines into the animatronics. If the Mimic simply watched and copied the animatronic performance routines, the technicians wouldn't have to program all the animatronics individually. Besides that, Mimic 2 could also change shape to fit into any kind of animatronic suit. I can't make it all out. But from what I can tell, when the team created the Mimic line, they didn't want to have to program in every show routine step by step. That was a lot of coding. So they just programmed the Mimic to basically watch and learn. Not only could a Mimic fit into any costume, it was designed to observe the other routines and then mimic them. I wish I could read all of this, but it seems like the original Mimic began mimicking not just the other animatronics, but also people. And it did it in ways that weren't intended. I'm not sure what it did. I can't just make out the words misconstrue, scared, potential disaster, and deactivate remaining Mimic endos. After an unknown incident happened at Freddy's, where a Mimic 2 endo started copying humans in a way it wasn't intended, all Mimic endoskeletons got deactivated and stored away. The Mimic wasn't used again till the creation of the Pizzaplex. A group of construction workers are working and cleaning up Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, planning to turn it into a museum. While they are working, a truck drops off a delivery of new animatronics. All of them are new and shiny, the Glamrocks. But one of them stands out. A big, burnt-looking endoskeleton with rabbit ears. The Mimic. One of the construction workers takes the Mimic with him to the pizza place to try and reprogram him into dismembering the endoskeletons in the building and pile them up. Things go well, until they don't. The Mimic starts to confuse the construction workers as endoskeletons, and starts tearing them apart one by one. More body parts flew past, more blood sprayed. Danny ran through a cacophony of hysteria, and everything Danny had ever learned about being polite and following the rules and respecting others was deconstructed along with the men around him. He cared about nothing but getting out of the pizzeria turned abattoir. Danny dodged and dove and scrambled and flayed, and he finally reached the door. He slammed the door. Then he kept running, past piles of lumbers and stacks of rebar, past more conversing construction workers. Then he screamed at the man spreading the poured cement. "Seal it! Seal the door!" Then he screamed louder. He pointed back towards the entrance of the pizzeria. The cement workers finally looked up. They turned and looked towards the pizzeria door. "Seal it!" Then he cried out again, and he kept running. A while after all the entrances to the pizza place are closed, a few teenagers sneak into the construction site and break into the pizza place to discover what the building used to be. But quickly they discover the place is filled with piles of human body parts. Desperately they try to escape, but their way in is shut off. They are trapped. It doesn't take long for them to come face to face with the Mimic himself. The Mimic starts wearing multiple costume suits, left behind in the pizzeria, just like he learned from David, and starts hunting them down one by one, adding their body parts to the pile. It doesn't take long until only 3 teenagers are left, Lucia, Kelly, and Jace. From researching an animatronic manual, Lucia finds out that the endoskeleton in question is Mimic 2. Out of an act of desperation, they make a plan to trap the Mimic into a room, but Jace dies in the process. Once they barricade the door and the mimic is trapped, we finally get an insight into the mimic himself. The mimic knew how to open the door, so it had walked over and grasped the door's handle. It turned the handle, but the door wouldn't open. It exerted more force, wood cracked, and the handle came free of the door. The mimic looked at it and tossed the handle onto the pile of doll parts. The mimic had then reached into the hole the handle had left behind. It pulled the door open. Now the mimic faced a solid expanse of metal, a tabletop that blocked the doorway. It had no establishment protocol for getting through the solid wall, so it turned away from the metal. The mimic was not designed to be confined in a room, so it had accessed what it had learned about exiting rooms. It immediately recalled watching the boy unit squirm into the little tunnel, which was the other way out of the room. The mimic would copy the boy unit and go out of the room that way. The tunnel opening was small, its head fit through the opening, but its shoulders didn't. This wasn't the problem. The mimic simply had to take a different form. It was programmed to do this. It could take any form necessary to fulfill its functioning. The mimic is still able to escape the room through the ducts. Out of desperation, Lucia gets the idea to hide in the mascot suits to become invisible to the mimic, since the mimic only seems to attack and dismember humans, not the suits. So Lucia hides inside of a mouse costume, and Callie hides inside of a blue dog costume. But it's only then that they see one of the mimic's frightening forms. Half a second later, the lights came back on. They came back on just in time for Lucia to see something crawling out of the back of the mushroom costume. It took all of Lucia's willpower not to scream at the top of her lungs. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. When Hope, just minutes before she had died, described the mimic, she described it as a big shiny black metal skeleton. Before Lucia had found the user's manual that told her that the thing that had killed Hope was a robot, called the Mimic, she and the others had thought of the thing as a creature, but it had been an upright, fakely man-shaped creature. The drawings Lucia had seen in the manual had depicted an upright creature as well. The user's manual, however, had said the Mimic could take many forms. Apparently, this was one of its forms. Creeping out of the back of the overalls-clad mushroom was an abomination of twisted and contorted metal. The abomination was a mass of metal joints and wires that were shaped into something vaguely resembling a mutated spider, with one of its eyes on one of the legs and the other on its back. The frightening spider had 9 legs instead of a spider's usual 8. One of the legs extended from where its mouth should have been. The last epilogue ends when the mimic tries to wear the blue dog suit, the suit where Callie is hiding. He opens the back of the suit and crawls inside, popping back in his normal humanoid shape, crushing Callie in the process, similarly like a person being crushed in a Springlock suit. That's where it ends. For now, we don't know how the epilogues end yet, since there's one book left to be released in this series. Once the Pizzaplex is built and open for a while, we see the mimic again in the story The Storyteller. The head chairman of the company, Mr. Burroughs, gets the idea to replace the creative team of the Pizzaplex with a storytelling AI to cut back on costs. Edwin, now the head of the creative team, is not happy with his choice and tries everything in his power to stop it from happening. But the plan gets approved and a giant baobab tree with a yellow trunk and rainbow-colored branches gets built in the middle of the atrium. The tree is connected to every arcade, animatronic and attraction inside the Pizzaplex, so the AI can generate new stories and experiences for the Pizzaplex. But things go wrong. Quickly, the animatronic mascots start to act out because of it. Freddy starts to act like a toddler, Chica craves attention, Monty becomes aggressive, and Roxy becomes a bully. Edwin slowly sees how the AI's negative effects on the Pizzaplex and chooses to start an investigation. Once he breaks into the baobab tree, he quickly finds out his worst fears came true. The AI controlling the Pizzaplex was Mimic 1 all along. What's even worse is that the AI is placed inside the center of the baobab tree, taking the form of a metal white tiger head. Edwin sneaks into the tree multiple nights, trying to deactivate the program. But once Mr. Burrow finds out about it, he locks Edwin up inside the tree by closing the entrance at the top of the tree, letting Edwin suffocate inside and die. Slowly, Burrow starts to realize what he actually did, and after days of contemplating, he chooses to enter the tree to see what happened to Edwin. Once he opens the door to the storyteller and steps inside, he is met with a strange sight. Edwin is laying dead on the ground, surrounded with drawings. The drawings contain strange symbols, circles, triangles within triangles. The last note in Edwin's hand has the words "I'm sorry" written on them. Burroughs is understandingly freaked out by this and tries to flee the crime scene. But the door is locked. He's trapped inside with Edwin. Out of desperation, Burroughs tries pulling the plugs and wires, trying to deactivate the storyteller. But even then, the eyes of the tiger keep glowing. Out of desperation, Burrows starts beating the tiger head, but it has no result. He tries to scream, trying for someone to hear him and help him out, but Burrow's fate is sealed. Weeks later, in the story Tiger Rock, it's shown that only after 3 weeks after its creation, the techs are already planning to remove the storyteller tree. The tree caused a lot of problems for the Pizzaplex attractions, and constantly shuts down the power. A kid by the name of Kai is kind of disappointed by this choice. He was excited to see the storyteller for himself. Instead, Kai tries out one of the new exclusive VR experiences. A VR experience that will show him the future Pizzaplex. Once he's in the VR world, he comes in contact with the animatronic named Tiger Rock, a big white tiger robot with a realistic fur and 2 different colored eyes, a blue eye and a green one. Tiger gives him a tour of the futuristic Pizzaplex, and has many attractions. But quickly, Kai grows uncomfortable with the tiger's behavior. The tiger is constantly studying him, looking at his arms and hands, holding them and pulling at them at every chance he gets. Kai gets scared of Tiger Rock and runs away from him. Hiding in the VR version of Gator Golf, Kai thinks he's safe. Ignoring the odd way his body felt, Kai kept sprinting around. As he did, he kept an eye on Tiger Rock, who was shadowing Kai all too closely. Kai's bicep was throbbing. He was pretty sure Tiger Rock had torn a muscle in his arm. How much worse would Kai be hurt if Tiger Rock got to spawn Kai again? Kai dove behind a black crocodile that was trotting across the green of the 9th hole. Tiger Rock see me? Kai wondered as he tried to flatten himself to stay hidden by the creeping metal reptile. Kai risked raising his head just a little. He gasped. He was looking right into Tiger Rock's mismatched eyes. He was just a couple feet away. Are we playing hide and seek? Tiger Rock asked. I know how to play. I learned a long time ago. Kai yelped, stood and ran. He galloped towards Gator Golf's back entrance and shot into the back hall. But before Tiger Rock can pull his arm again, the VR experience is over. Once Kai is back in the real world, things seem different. Elements from the VR game start to fuse into the real world. Robotic animals show up with the same colored eye as Tiger Rock. The stairs in the school turn into an escalator, like the ones in the Pizzaplex. And finally, Tiger Rock shows up in his room at night. Kai slowly realizes he's still in the VR game. He tries to desperately wake himself up from the VR experience while Tiger Rock keeps walking closer to his bed. Surprisingly, Kai is able to finally wake up back into the real world. The police of the Pizzaplex said he was stuck in the VR booth for 5 hours. They weren't able to open the doors. Once Kai is home, he's happy he's in the real world again and safe. Until Tiger Rock suddenly shows up in front of his window, attacking him and taking his arms. And, well, that's where the Mimic story ends in the books. Well, that is until the Mimic finally shows up in Ruin. Mimic lures a girl named Cassie to the Pizzaplex, in hopes she can save him. He tricks her by mimicking the voice of her friend Gregory. With the help of the Vanny mask, Cassie is able to navigate her way through the ruins of the Pizzaplex to deactivate the Mix's system, a security system made to trap the Mimic in the basement. But once Cassie deactivates the security, she quickly finds out the Mimic tricked her, and thanks to her help, he's finally set free. Mimic, it's a Mimic, and now there's a tiger in VR. War, Mimic, silly Mimic. With his kitty went a bit too far. I just took his arms. He mimics you, he mimics me. Tigers too apparently mimic. Alright, I know how long that first part was. But I thought it was important to give as much detail as possible for people who haven't been able to read the books. I tried to get all the factual information out first to catch everyone up to date. But now we'll get into theorizing territory. I mentioned multiple times that I think the Mimic is a character we're already familiar with. But who exactly is this character? Well, let's take a look at the facts. The Mimic is an entity that both has a physical form and a digital AI form. The physical form of the Mimic is trapped under the Pizzaplex, in the Pizza Place. Meanwhile, the AI form of the Mimic is put into the Pizzaplex systems through the storyteller and is controlling all the attractions and animatronics because of it. This AI is making the robot entertainers more aggressive than they are supposed to be. The Mimic AI is also able to communicate and possess multiple people through multiple VR attractions. Yeah, I think you get where I'm going with this. The Mimic is... Glitch Trap! I know. A lot of fans think Glitchtrap is the Five Nights at Freddy's antagonist William Afton, but I think with the reveal of the Mimic that we finally got the real answer to what Glitchtrap actually is. I know this is an unpopular opinion by now, many theorists already made videos on why the Mimic is Glitchtrap, but I hope that I'm able to add new stuff onto the pile of evidence. So firstly, how can Mimic possibly be Glitchtrap? Well, remember how it's mentioned in the books that the Mimic Endo got mass produced by Vesper Entertainment, for the purpose to preserve and copy animatronic show routines. This directly connects back to the circuit boards from FNAF Help Wanted, where the company of Silver Parasol Games is given multiple old circuit boards to use for pathfinding. Even Hand Unit tells us in the game what the circuit boards were used for.
We went to great lengths to create an authentic VR experience, including using scanned photographs for reference and using original performance routines where applicable. Using proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment, our VR development teams were able to use vintage control boards almost like plug and play, digitally recreating performances and personalities from the past in an instant.
When the team created the Mimic line, they didn't want to have to program in every show routine step by step. That was a lot of coding. So they just programmed the Mimic to basically watch and learn. But using the circuit boards has awful consequences for the VR game, that being the creation of Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap himself also acts similarly to the Mimic by mimicking the voice of Tape Girl.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We learned from the tapes that Tape Girl tried to trap Glitchtrap by splitting the code into multiple tapes that are hidden throughout the game. She tells us to not collect these tapes to keep Glitchtrap trapped, but her tone switches in the final tape.
Hello. You don't know me. I had created a series of logs for you documenting the troubled development of this VR game that you're now testing, in hopes that you, whoever you are, and whatever team you are with, will abandon development. Now I fear that those logs are being used as a Trojan horse. If you're unable to abandon development, hide all traces of these logs that I've created. I fear that finding them and reassembling them will also reassemble the very thing I've tried so desperately to destroy. There is a way to kill it. It wants to escape through someone plugged into this game. That's you now. You have to let it begin the process of leaving through you. Then use the disconnect switch that I've embedded by the main stage. Let it approach you. Let it begin to merge with you. Play the music and flip the switch. That will cause a hard restart of the game and flush the memory, effectively killing it. I hope. I don't know when it will come for you.
The tape tricks Vanessa into performing actions that directly lead her into being taken over by Glitchtrap. What happens in Help Wanted also directly parallels the storyline of the Mimic in Ruin. In both Ruin and Help Wanted, the antagonist uses the voice of someone else to trick the protagonist into accidentally freeing him. See how Glitchtrap and Mimic have the same motivation in both games? Both are trapped and mimicking someone else's voice as a way to be set free. Mimic being Glitchtrap could also explain a lot of other details we see in Help Wanted, like the Hard Mode minigames. The Hard Mode minigames could possibly be AI-generated copies of the already existing minigames, made by the Mimic. The Mimic copies what he sees, and the minigames being so messed up in Hard Mode could be the result of them being put together by a messed up AI. One minigame having us go upside down in an elevator, enlarging props to cause the player to see worse, filling a room with copies of the same models. It even explains why the Dreadbeard DLC doesn't have hard mode levels. It's because Glitchtrap was already contained inside the plushie and part of Vanessa by the time of the Halloween DLC. We also noticed by the fact that in the same DLC, Vanessa already built a Vanny mask. Talking about the mask, the same exact mask we used to communicate with Glitchtrap in Help Wanted is used to communicate with the Mimic in Ruin. The Mimic takes the form of Halpy in the mask. We know this by the fact that Halpy sometimes switches his eye color to orange, the same color as the Mimic's eyes. But Clavis, if Glitchtrap is Mimic, why does he take the form of String Bonnie in Help Wanted? That seems like something William Afton would do. Wouldn't Mimic prefer looking like a tiger? Well, you're right. One of the biggest arguments used against Mimic and Glitchtrap being the same is the fact that Glitchtrap uses a lot of visual elements that connect him back to William Afton. But there are two possible explanations for this. Option 1. Good Shop is a model generated by the Mimic himself by using multiple elements from the VR game. This would explain why Good Shop is a hand-stitched suit instead of a classic Spring Bonnie Springlock suit. It's more similar to the suits the Mimic wears in the epilogues and in the Mimic story. It would also explain why the Good Shop model has tear marks and spit around his mouth. It's mimicking Edwin's anger and grief from the Mimic story. And the final interesting detail is that Good Shop also suspiciously looks similar to the Silver Parasol Games logo. See how both are rabbits wearing a vest? It's possible to make purely combine the mascot of Spring Bonnie with the looks of the logo to create the appearance of Good Shop. And option 2 is that, well, Pizza Party was simply an existing minigame instead of Help Wanted. A Mimic used the Spring Bonnie model as its main persona to blend into the VR world, because we know from Mimic story how much Mimic likes to take up random personas and suits. People also should realize that Mimic doesn't always take the tiger persona. Even if the white tiger seems the most personal to Mimic, he only takes the appearance of a tiger once in Tiger Rock. In other stories, like the epilogues, he will take the form of any mascot suit he can get his hands on. The Mimic's appearance seems to be influenced by whatever situation he's into, and taking the form of Spring Bonnie is probably the most appropriate form for him to take when he's literally put inside of a VR game making fun of the past murders. Mimic being Good Shop also affects the storyline of FNAF Special Delivery. In the emails, we learned that the team behind developing the animatronics for the Funtime service also scanned in a vintage circuit board that caused a glitch inside of their system. Not only did the glitch cause the animatronics to act strangely, like eating a warehouse cat, it also caused the service to suddenly send out vintage Bonnie models to people's home. This is a character that wasn't part of the servers, Springtrap, a character the Mimic came in contact with by first being in the Fazbear virtual experience. But most importantly, we see how the Mimic has negative effects on Vanessa's well-being in the emails that her co-worker Louis sends to her. In the emails, it describes how Louis constantly gets red flag reports because Vanessa is looking up and buying suspicious things during work hours. Buying thumb screws, looking up how long a human body can survive while being cut in two, and even searching for help. Of course this makes Louis worried and he tries to help her. What this shows is the process of the Mimic trying to take control of Vanessa. He tries everything, from looking up human compliance on the internet to trying to motivate Vanessa by torturing her with thumb screws. But it's also shown how the Mimic actually listens and learns from Louis. Hey Ness, I know I mentioned trigger words, but the AI is actually a little bit more sophisticated than that, and of course there are people like me watching the system too. So the word compliance by itself isn't going to set off any red flags, but the sentence, how to induce compliance into human subjects and how to induce self-compliance, did actually get my attention. I think the answer might involve chocolate chip cookies. Always works on me. It's like there's two sides of you, and I feel like that too. Some days I'm unstoppable, and some days I'm just stopped. There's a bright, happy side of you that orders cupcakes, cookbooks, and rainbow hair extensions, and a glittery pink journal with all the pictures of puppies, and that's great. But then there's the side of you that ordered chocolate and flowers for yourself, and pretended they were from your boyfriend Brad. I'm not judging you for being lonely. I definitely understand where you're coming from there, but Ness, I also saw what you had written on the card. Flowers for your grave? Why would you have an imaginary boyfriend who's threatening to kill you? Eventually, Vanessa moves from her previous job to her new job as head security guard of the Pizzaplex. Glitchtrap, being the Mimic, would give Vanessa a motivation to go back to the Pizzaplex in the first place. The Mimic wants to be reunited with its original body that's still trapped under the basement in the pizza place. Mimic used Vanessa as a way to escape and get back to its body, in a similar way the Mimic uses Cassie to escape and ruin. The Mimic even explains Burntrap in a way. Burntrap is probably the original Mimic endo that was left behind in the pizza place, reuniting with another part of his AI that was used in the VR game. Vanessa, reuniting Glitchtrap with his old body, causes his knowledge he gained from the VR game to fuse with his knowledge of the physical Mimic, causing it to take a very similar appearance, mimicking Springtrap, a character that Glitchtrap learned about by being in the VR game. Also, the blob can be explained away by the fact that it's probably the result of what the Mimic is doing in the epilogues. The Mimic killed multiple workers and teenagers and piled their bodies together with the remains of multiple dismembered endoskeletons. These piles of human and animatronic remains probably eventually fused together to become the blob, explaining why the blob would seem so supernatural compared to the other characters in Security Breach, but also explaining why it's a vendetta against Burntrap, being the embodiment of the pain and suffering the Mimic caused. Personally, I think that the Mimic also explains a lot of environmental storytelling we see in the Pizzaplex, one of them being the Post-it Note Room. The Post-it Note Room has been one of the most discussed and controversial elements of Security Breach, A room full of drawings that people have tried to desperately connect to any kind of character. A lot of theorists tried their best by saying the room may be connected to Gregory, Charlie, maybe even Elizabeth. But I think there's a very simple answer to this. And yes, it's the Mimic. I know, cheap, but let me explain. Most theorists try to first analyze the drawings to connect it to a certain character. But that's hard to do when most drawings simply depict basic elements that aren't exclusive to a single character. Balloons, party hats, a kid with their friends, ice cream. These are general things you find in any Freddy's establishment. So how exactly can you connect it back to the Mimic? Well, we already know from the Mimic story that the Mimic learned how to draw from David and Edwin. Drawing is one of the ways the Mimic communicates with David. Later in the storyteller, Edwin also seems to draw once he's trapped in a tree to try and communicate with the Mimic 1 program. If you look at the text and post-it notes, you also see there are general sentences you would simply hear when you're in a crowded establishment filled with kids. Imagine for a second you are sitting in the center of the Pizzaplex. "Let's get a snack," you hear a mom say to her youngest child while they walk to the nearest food stand. Meanwhile, you hear another kid tell one of his friends how they want to play all the games. You also hear a birthday party going on in one of the party rooms. A kid shrieking out of surprise. "Is this all for me?" she says while looking at her pile of presents. To the window, you see how the kid opens all her presents, while Freddy walks in with a birthday cake. You look around the atrium and you notice how colorful it is. Yellow, green, blue, red. You see a mom scream at the child, pulling him back when he almost walks into a staff-only area. That's for grown-ups only. Near the end of the day, you hear all the kids leaving after a birthday party, saying goodbye to one another. And if you're somehow able to hide and stay in the Pizzaplex overnight, you would also probably see the night guard walking around at night. Do you see what I'm getting at? All the drawings are general statements and things you would see in a Freddy's location. It's like whoever drew this was someone observing their surroundings, taking in all the things they heard and saw. And we already know a character that does exactly that, the Mimic. The Mimic was designed to analyze show routines and copy them. But we know from the epilogues that the Mimic endos analyzed and copied anything they saw around them, to the point they start to copy human behavior. So I think that's what this is. The drawings are the Mimic in Vanessa's body, drawing all the things he saw in the Pizzaplex, all the conversations he heard while he was controlling the animatronics. Mimic is part of the Pizzaplex system, causing him to be able to watch and analyze everything that's going on in the establishment, just to record his findings afterwards. I know many of you still won't be convinced, and well, I can't blame you. For the longest time, the game seemed to try and convince us that Glitchtrap and Burntrap were simply William Afton coming back for another round. Because that's what he does. He always comes back. But I don't think he did this time. I also get a lot of people don't see a reason for the Mimic to act the way that he does. He's simply an aggressive endoskeleton made to copy his surroundings. Why would he take the form of Afton? Why would he act the way that he does? And I think that this is because people don't give the Mimic enough credit. Yes, he's an AI, but he's still infected with agony. He's more aware than you may think. And in reality, well, the Mimic is just the embodiment of the real villain of FNAF, the embodiment of the Fazbear Entertainment franchise itself. Ever since the start of this new storyline, starting with the game Help Wanted, the new theme of the franchise became clear. The Fazbear Entertainment brand turning their past tragedies into ghost stories as a way to profit of it. Yes, Henry may destroy every haunted object that was left in the franchise in the fire, but the memory of what happened still lives on. And that memory is currently being used by Fazbear Entertainment to make money. But by keeping the memory of the past alive for profit, they also cause a new monster to come to power, the Mimic. The Mimic may be an AI, but once he became part of the Fazbear brand, he's been constantly used for every single new project Fazbear Entertainment worked on. The VR game, the Funtime servers. They even put him in front and center in the atrium and connected him to every attraction in the Pizzaplex. He is an AI that has been force-fed FNAF lore. Attractions and games based off tragedies that the company caused so many years ago. And because of it, they created a new monster. They trained this AI to basically become the personification of their brand, so it's no wonder it ended up becoming a monster similar to William Afton. The only way for the Mimic to finally be defeated would be by ending everything for a second time. Finally letting go of the past, learning from it and moving on. Because even if we're able to defeat the Mimic once and for all, the company behind it can just create another monster with their own selfishness and ignorance. And with Cassie finally setting the Mimic free, we know the Mimic isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Like Freddy said once, the band will keep playing forever and ever. Forever and ever. Forever.
Let's go!
Okay, after all of this you probably wonder what's up next. Is this series over? Well, no, not yet. I still have one part left to discuss. And that's one of the most controversial topics in this debate. Parallels. So, I see you in the final part. Thanks for watching. Mimic. Just a Mimic. He used to be pretty cool. That's me, Mimic. Silly Mimic. But now he looks like some old fool. I do. It's but I was pretty bad, so let's move on and go to bed, Mimic.